I always feel the need to let people know, like, oh, we've started recording because, now you're on the record, in case there's anything you didn't want to say. I know you, especially, of all people, don't care about that. But I have interacted with people before where it's been like, oh, fuck, you started recording? Like, god damn it. Like, what the
Yeah, yeah.
fuck?
There have been times that I've been taken by surprise, like, oh shit, started recording. But it's not like there's ever like a moment where, like,
Because it's not like you're going to stop spouting all of your racist, sexist, personal, destroying stuff. You're just going to say it more and with more sarcasm. Or less, maybe? Depending on the situation.
yeah, I don't know. I'm a complicated animal.
Much like all animals, much like Daimajin, because as we've done in the past, we've compared him to different animals. We'll talk about that at the start. So, why don't we just get into this
Is
thing without
it
any?
a tradition that we compare Daimajin to animals? I don't remember that.
Well, it was a tradition last time because I used it in the title of the last episode. I'll explain it. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is the Demons from Outer Space. The episode number, I believe, is 120. No, I think it's 121. There we go. Bam. I think I saved myself. Pretty sure. Um, and today, as we promised last time, we're going to be talking about a 1960s tokusatsu movie. One of the only in a series that came out the exact same year as every other film in that series. Dylan, what is that series, though?
We're going to be concluding our look at the Daimajin trilogy from Dai with Wrath of Daimajin or Daimajin Strikes Again, as it's also known.
Well,
Uh,
I looked this up. It's also known as Return of Daimajin. Hang on, there's a couple of other titles. We can go through these real quick. Where's the page here? I got it right here. Majin's Counterattack. That's not bad. The Revenge of Majin and Majin Strikes Again. It cuts out all the die, which I guess is fine. I mean, it just means big. We take die off of kaiju anyway, so realistically, if you did that with Daimajin, it wouldn't be uncool. Although Daimajin does sound cooler, so I guess it is
it
kind
does.
of uncool in a way, in a very important way. So yeah, we're gonna talk about Wrath of Daimajin tonight. Uh,
Yeah, even though the DVD or the Blu-ray set that we have, the wonderful Mill Creek Blu-ray, even though it uses the counterattack title, I personally am quite fond of Wrath. Uh,
Wrath is the way to go. Daimajin Strikes Again is what it says on mine. That's what it says on the menu and what it says on the title. It's
right.
what does it say on yours?
That's what I was saying. Even though they use Strikes Again as the title for the Blu-ray, I've always been partial to the Wrath title.
Oh, okay. I thought you said one of the other titles. My bad. Um. So, yes, we're gonna talk about Wrath of Daimajin tonight. Now, here's the thing about this one. Lots of changes go on in the series at this point. The thing about the second one that we talked about when we reviewed it was that it's largely very, very similar in tone and narrative to the first film. There are some very distinct differences that make it both better and worse for different reasons, but all in all, it feels like it's of the same ilk. And it's not that this doesn't, but the changes are certainly more apparent. And I think, above all else, what you can say about Wrath, good or bad, it's certainly a way more distinct sequel than the last one was. What's
Yeah,
what is the last one called again? Because they all have different. Return of Daimajin. Okay,
yeah.
that one's the easy one. See, because this one of the alternate titles is Daimajin Returns. It's like, god damn it, don't do this to me. But yes,
That's the fact that they all came out the same year, which just makes it even more confusing.
right, exactly, and they're not all directed by the same person though. The last one, as we discussed in the previous time we did this, was directed by Kenji Mizumi. This one was directed by Kazuo Mori. I don't know who the hell that is, but he's different than the other two films. So isn't that interesting that even though all these films feel very, very similar to each other in narrative and scope and pace and everything and just in every sense, they're all directed by three different people. But again,
Hmm.
like I said, I think this one stands out more than the other one, than the other sequel. But
Well, probably because one reason is, as we've been discussing over the course of this, Daimajin's character goes through a shift from movie 1 to 2 to 3. He becomes more benevolent as time goes on, and this is obviously being the last movie in the franchise. This is the most like straight up a good guy that we've seen him.
Right.
So it's the furthest from what we had in the original, where he was basically just an angry, avenging god who would step on anybody in his path. In the third movie, he's much more specific about killing the bad guys and then getting out of town.
Right.
And we saw that shit in the second movie, but it's even more pronounced this time. He's such a good guy in this movie.
And it's like, and what makes him more of a good guy is what it takes to get him to get his ass into gear is a lot less drastic than the other two movies.
Yeah. What's interesting about it, though, and this struck me watching it this time in a way that it hadn't before, you wouldn't get that impression from the opening scene of the movie.
Oh, it's the best part, I think. It's amazing.
In fact, if there's one thing that you can give this one above any of them, I think, is that it has the best opening scene.
I think so. I would have to agree with you. It really stuck out to me this time. I did not remember that at all from the only other time I've seen this. And yeah, that opening scene is amazing.
But you wouldn't get the impression that he was more benevolent in this movie if you just saw that scene. I wonder if it was meant to take place because I'm not sure exactly how long that's supposed to take place before the events of the story proper. It could be that they were trying to show that he had actually mellowed out in universe. You know what I mean? It could be that opening scene was like a significant amount of time previous, and that since then he's become more benevolent, because it just doesn't match up with what we see later on in the film. Or that could be a tonal problem.
It doesn't tie to it at all, except to explain that this takes place in a time where these natural disasters were believed to be caused by gods. And it's like, this is in a context where they were. Like, we see the god. So, like, he comes to life and kills everybody. So
maybe that's the problem with the movie, because you could take this exact same opening scene and staple it onto the first movie.
That's what I think it is, because I think...
And it would actually make more sense.
Yeah, I think what you said makes sense as well, because we've also got to remember this is Japan circa 1966. They're releasing all three of these movies in the same exact year. So I think they're maybe going, this is what Daimajin is supposed to be like, wild and unruly. Because they also describe him as that in the movie. So maybe you don't even need that opening scene to show that. But that's what they perceive him as. What the legend about him is in line more so with like how we see him in the second one, where he's even not as malevolent as he is in the first one. But even still, the idea is always the same. He's this mountain god who will sometimes go crazy and destroy and kill everybody, and that's his reputation.
Right, and don't just stay the fuck away from his mountain, and we'll all be fine.
And that's a big plot point in this one, that you're not supposed to cross Daimajin's mountain, and our protagonists do. We'll get to our protagonist in a second. But I think it's supposed to make the change at the end where he is more benevolent and comes to the rescue of these kids. Come across to an audience who maybe hadn't seen the first two movies, where we're supposed to think of him as this, really vengeful. It takes a lot of motivation to get him going. Very dark and twisted force of nature.
I also think that maybe from the director's point of view, or maybe even the studio's point of view, whoever's decision it was to do it that way. You have these other two movies released earlier this year. Presumably, some people probably would have seen more than one of them, although it's also fair to assume that somebody in 1966 might have only seen one out of the three.
That's what I'm saying. It's like they don't know, so they're just placing their bets as like, well, just in case, let's put this awesome scene at the beginning where he's causing natural disasters.
But
and it's different natural disasters too. It's better. It's cooler than the first movie where at the beginning he's just stomping around.
But presuming that somebody had seen all three of the films, they might watch that and think, "Yeah, this is the Daimajin I know from the last."
And it's absolutely not.
And then the rest of the movie subverts their expectations. Or for somebody who hasn't seen any of the movies before, they might watch that opening scene and think, "Oh, Daimajin's fucking like horrible," and then the rest of the movie, again, perhaps it's just there to set up expectations.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was exactly the intention. So I think that is successful. Like always, the Daimajin stuff is good. However, he has the least amount of presence in this one, which is interesting because he has a physical avatar that we see throughout the film.
Yes,
with the
that's
hawk. So what I was gonna say before we started recording, was in the last one we described some element of the film. I think it was Daimajin himself as a different kind of animal than the prior film, and that's certainly the case in this one. He's a different animal from the other two Daimajins, and that he's more benevolent. And in the title of the last podcast, I described him as a bear because that's an animal. That's a different animal than, whatever the first one was. I don't know. I don't know why I picked a bear, but in this one, he will be a hawk. He's the hawk Daimajin.
Indeed he is.
And my God, that bit where he fucking swoops down and just attacks those guards or the bad guys chasing the kids at the end. My God. Like that was worth not getting much Daimajin throughout the movie, because that's my problem, is that I just don't think he has much presence outside of that opening scene in the end, because so much of it is about the kids.
Right. Well, that's the one element of this movie that's probably the most unique as far as Daimajin's portrayal.
So let's talk about that now. Yes.
It's everything that happens in the opening and in the end when he comes and takes care of business is pretty in line with what we had seen from Daimajin in the past. But the introduction of this hawk avatar is a totally new element of the mythology that is only at play in this film, interestingly enough.
It makes a lot of sense that he would have that, though. But you're right. It's more in line with this benevolent idea of like, oh, he's a watchful protector going around, making sure everything's in order. Daimajin liked to sleep a lot in the last two movies. He was a big sleeper. And that was the point, was you didn't want to wake him up, because if you did, everybody was going to die.
Right.
And in this one...
And in this movie, it seems like people have the impression that if you wake him up, everybody's going to die.
Right, which is good. I like that a lot. I think that's something that makes it feel very in line with the other two. Like, it's interesting, these movies have very little to do with each other, but they have a good sense of continuity about like how the universe feels and the rules about and the rules about like how the people feel about Daimajin. The rules of Daimajin change quite a bit, as we've been discussing, but largely in the broad strokes, Daimajin is Daimajin, and the people view him as such.
Not only is Daimajin the only recurring character, he's the only he's the only person who has an arc over all three movies.
Right. Well, he's the only one who has any kind of trilogy-long character arc. So the other element of his mythology that I think kind of leads to him not having much presence, and again, it's interesting that they have the hawk, but I feel like throughout the movie, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a Daimajin movie. Like, I'm not just watching some Japanese movie about these kids going to save their family from these people who have enslaved them. But I think it was because the hawk represents that more benevolent side, and that's not Daimajin's deal. Although the hawk does swoop down and like swipe one of the kids at one point, doesn't it? Maybe it doesn't hurt them, but it does something to kind of indicate, go away, this is my mountain.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't remember the exact specifics of it, but I'm pretty sure that happens early on, because they have to make it clear to him, like, hey, listen, man, we're just passing through to go save our family. We don't mean any disrespect. We respect you a lot. And I like that they go up and pray to him early on, and then and it's not like the only bit where they pray to him is when they need him to do something, Yeah. Because again, it's good setup. There's a lot of good setup in this movie. Overall, just like the other two, it's damn good. It's a damn good historical Japanese film. It's got a good cast, both of characters and actual actors portraying them. They feel very genuine. And and as always, the Daimajin stuff is tip top tokusatsu action circa 1966, and it has a much more dramatic feel because of the setting and the scale.
I mean, my favorite movie is still the first one, but I think this is definitely the second strongest out of the three.
Okay, let's talk about that, shall we? Because that's what I've sort of been cunningly building to. So, yeah, the first one is still obviously the best because it's the most distinct. And
right.
I think...
It's also the most... There's an element... There's a sort of mythic simplicity to the first movie that really captures the imagination.
It sets up the the idea of Daimajin perfectly. And both
Right.
and both movies in their own ways subvert that. You know, the second one not as much, but it still does a little bit in terms of he's a lake god in that. And you know, like that's a big moment where they go through, like they go through the lake and go under, and then you just see the statue, and it's, you know, it's Daimajin, because we hadn't seen him, you know, move there. But
Well, there's also the bit where they make you think that he's been destroyed, or at least that's what they were going for. You know,
right.
Somebody
And in
that
the
movie,
first
like,
movie when that happens, everything's done, and that he doesn't freak out until later.
right.
Which is how they subverted that. And I think the second one, to me, is better paced. And that is the simple fact of why I think I enjoy it more. I think there's a lot more going on in the second movie. And
Right.
and that's what helps it a lot. The villains are better in both of the other two. That's another big thing. And this is a franchise that is not like a Marvel MCU movie where, like, it's not going to completely fall apart if the villain isn't the greatest thing ever, or any other Godzilla movie where even if, like, the other monster isn't amazing, or if his co-monster isn't great, it'll still be fine. It's a matter of the person who is antagonizing Daimajin to act needs to stand out. We need to feel like, God, Daimajin, please come murder this fucking dickhead. So that way the satisfaction of him doing so is you know, you get the most out of it. And I don't think this one gets the most out of it, because the villain, like, yeah, he does bad stuff. I'm not going to say that he doesn't. He fucking throws people, he orders people to be thrown in sulfur pits and all that. But in the grand scheme of things, his plan is very vague, and we don't really see it come to any kind of fruition. And I just think that he's the least developed of all three villains, and I think that leads to the Daimajin side of it feeling a little softer, not just in his characterization, but in the impact of him actually coming to life and destroying the base at the end. As good and cool as it is, you know, it's like looking, the actual impact of it emotionally is a little softened.
You know, the first movie was about Samanosuke betraying his lord and taking over the kingdom Lion King style. And the second movie was about an invading army coming into their territory, you know, Mulan style. This is kind of a combination of the two. He's taking people from a different clan and then doing the thing that Samanosuke was forcing his own people to do in the first movie.
It's
which
a
is
great idea.
Work on this vague construction project. That's really what the big problem with him is. I'm not entirely sure what they were building. Like, they explained in the first movie that they're building.
It's pretty much the same as Samanosuke's thing, except bigger, and there's more gunpowder because they have this sulfur pit in this mine.
See, that's what I assume is going on, is that they're mining the sulfur so that they can make more guns. We need guns.
There's a discussion about that. There's a lot of people discussing it, though. And the guy in the gold robes gets very little dialogue. And he doesn't do much of the bad stuff. There's that one bit where he whips the workers, and I'm like, okay, great, he whips people.
The guy in the gold robe is the main bad guy. Are you sure you're not thinking of the other guy?
What are you talking about?
The guy who wears the gold robes is the main bad guy.
Yeah, I know.
One
That's what I'm saying. And he's the one who Daimajin ultimately kills at the end. And I think that blow is softer because I don't really think the guy in the gold robes, whose name I can't even begin to recall, is that distinct, or we don't know that much about him, or we don't see him do enough bad stuff to feel the real satisfaction of, like, good, Daimajin ended him in a just and ironic way.
Yeah, that was another thing. As cool as it was to finally see Daimajin use that fucking knife that he's always carrying around, I kind of wish he hadn't stabbed that guy, just because it kind of ruins the irony of throwing him in the sulfur pit. He's already dead by the time you throw him into the sulfur pit. Because Daimajin's thing throughout all three movies has been killing the villain in an ironic way.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't. There's no feel to it. It's just cool in a visual sense, right? Like, aesthetically, it's cool.
He impales Samanosuke with the very nail that Samanosuke tried to destroy him with. He burns the villain from the second film on a makeshift cross, the same way that he was going to burn the heroes of the film. And in this, he really should have just chucked the guy into the sulfur pit, and then that would have been more poetic. But instead, he stabs him, which again, I was so happy to see him use that fucking knife for once. But, he could have done that to a henchman or something. Uh,
Yeah, he could have used that at any other point.
yeah.
But like I said, I just think that the emotional blow of this one is the softest, which is unfortunate because the story of having a bunch of family members taken from different villages and brought to this slave camp is great for a Daimajin movie, but I don't feel it. The stuff in the slave camp is okay. Like the kid's brother who tries to escape and gets shot. That was good, although he's an idiot. And I was angry at him watching that. I was like, come on, man, just go. Like, there's no need to. Like, he got shot in the arm and he just fell down and was like dead. And I'm like, come on, you got shot in the arm.
I'm dead.
I was like, come on, it's an arm wound. You can, like, realistically, that could be a flesh wound unless it hit an artery, which I don't believe it did. So keep going.
Hey man, he's never been shot before. He didn't know how to react.
That's fair, but if you're trying to escape, you'd think the adrenaline would just make you go. I mean, I'm sure he was tired, but like the adrenaline would make you go, fuck that. Especially since he was so close. All he had to do was get over the hill, and then he was good. But then there were guards on the other side, so he would have seen them there. So that, whatever. My point is moot. But even still, I like that. I like all that because you feel the emotional weight of that best there. But again, it's all very vague because there's no faces to it. It's like I can't tell you who was throwing people in sulfur pits or who was chasing people down in mines. It was all just Japanese men in armor. Because this is about the kids. And that's fine.
Well, that's unfortunately, I think, a problem with both of the sequels. I don't remember the guy from the second movie's name.
No, I don't remember his name, but I remember what his deal was, and I remember what he was doing and his face. I remember him drinking that stuff out of that like ashtray shaped cup and laughing at the girls dancing. Like he had a personality, and what they were trying to do was simple enough that I think it made sense. You know, their land was shit, and they were trying to take over these people's land because it was bountiful because of their relationship with Daimajin and the lake and the mountain. And they paid for it, which I think was different than the first one because they were doing it for somewhat sympathetic reasons, but of course they themselves were horrible, evil pillagers. It would have been interesting if they would have played that up more in the second movie, that they were more sympathetic about what they were doing because the land beyond the mountain was more barren and they had less ability to get crops and everything. So if they would have played that up as like their reason for invading and they wouldn't have been as straight up bad guys, I think that may have been a thing to make that more distinct from the first one, as opposed to just having like people who really like to murder innocent people. Which is what these movies always go for. This one more so than any other. It's very War for the Planet of the Apes as well, where it's like the only reason they don't kill them or beat them up until they can't get up is because they need them to work.
It is very War for the Planet of the Apes, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
In a way, the actual, military is Daimajin in that movie. Comes along and
yeah, okay, yeah, you're right, absolutely. And it's in the snow? Yeah, wow. The parallels are striking. Although in that, the main character who's in all three, Caesar, he goes through he's very dark in that one, as opposed to the other two.
Right.
As opposed to the rest of his apes who were trying to be better. Anyway. So all those parallels aside, I don't know, man. I think the second one stands out more to me. I will watch that one more often than this one for sure. Although I actually like the kids. They're not the thing that ruined this.
Yeah, let's talk about them.
Yeah, it's for me it's like the pace of how their story is executed. But yeah, let's talk about their story and what their deal is and what's going on.
Typically having kids in a movie can be a bummer,
especially in a kaiju movie or in a tokusatsu movie.
it ruins a lot of great movies. I mean, one of the only problems with Terminator 2, and I mean only problems, is that kid's line deliveries are not always the best. Although I think he does a decent job through most of it. Uh, but man, this movie is an exception to that rule. And I mean, there are lots of exceptions to that rule. The kid from Gamera the Brave isn't bad.
Aliens.
Aliens. Logan, more recently.
Yeah,
Stranger
Logan.
Things.
Yeah, Stranger Things depending.
But man, the kids in this movie are actually pretty good. Like
Yeah.
they're pretty compelling. Like I didn't mind following them at all.
You know why? Because they're very earnest. And this is something I really like about this series. It's very earnest. There's nothing obnoxious about it. There's nothing overtly self-aware or ironic. These kids aren't like, they're not modern kids running around having fun. Like just making asses out of themselves. They're trying to survive. They're trying to do what's best for themselves and their village and their families. So
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like that vibe is just more compelling and more tolerable than if they were just running around like trying to like serve their own ends as opposed to trying to save somebody out for selfless goals. So I think that just works better. But there is a very, very little kid, and there was one element of that annoyed me. His name is Little Sugi. He's like the only name in this that I remember because I fucking got so sick of his older brother screaming it at him. Did you have that? Like, he just constantly was like, Sugi boy, and in the subtitles it says Little Sugi, but I'm like, it sounds like Sugi boy, which I'm sure it's differently spelled in Japanese.
I'm assuming that the little part is a nickname.
Yeah, I mean, you think it'd be like Kun or whatever. I don't know. I don't speak Japanese. I speak American, like any proper American.
The language Jesus spoke.
The language Jesus spoke, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the I mentioned Gamera the Brave before. Every time I watch that movie, I get fucking tired of hearing the name Toto. But
yeah, just screaming things is just no good. Just stop screaming people's names. Just say it once and then say, "Hey, you."
that's a thing in Japanese entertainment, though. You get that in a lot of anime. They can't just watch the fight; they have to yell "Goku." I'm like, yeah, I know who's fighting.
I know they always have to remind us what their name is. Like we're gonna fucking forget. Like I feel like that's a thing in Japanese entertainment more than any other franchise. Ugh. I'm tired, folks. Did I mention that? Any other country, like they just constantly feel the need to remind us, like this is this person's name. I guess it's because they're very title oriented over there. I guess Andres has described that before. Like they're very focused on what they're called. Presumably, we can ask him about that on the next SOS. But I remember him mentioning something about that at one point. So maybe that's why they feel the need to shout their names at each other so often.
Yeah, and to remind me that Goku is fighting Frieza right now.
Goku!
Like, I know. I'm watching it, bro. But
Yugi in fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! My God, how many times I have to hear people shout that up at somebody in a duel tower? My God. Anyway, so
also narrating the fight, like I'm watching like or in that case the card battle.
Right, yeah, like they're sitting there going, fucking Kaiba has another card in his deck that will make this card even worse, and he knows that he's going to draw it, but Yugi also knows that he's going to draw it, but Yugi also doesn't have any cards, but Yugi also has every card because he's Yugi. What?
I can kind of understand the necessity for that early on in the show, but then I'm like, dude, I'm 200 episodes in. You don't have to tell me what
It's
Blue
like,
Eyes White Dragon does.
I also know that you're not going to follow the rules of the game, so it doesn't matter. Like, shut up and just do it. Just have the monsters blow each other up. Like, that's what we're here for. They're not even real monsters in that. Have we talked about if you ever do Yu-Gi-Oh, you should just do it where like they're real monsters that they're summoning, like fucking H.P. Lovecraft style?
I mean, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah,
Depending.
but it doesn't happen in every version. Like, that only happens in certain versions. Like, Pegasus tries to do that, and it doesn't work. It happens during the Duelist City, whatever the hell that was called, tournament.
Well, during a normal duel, it's usually just holographs. But we find out based on real monsters, and whenever there's a shadow game, the idea is that they're like really there.
Right. Because the tablets in the original games were summoning the actual monsters.
If they're called shadow games in the Japanese version,
They're probably called death games.
Because the Shadow Realm is just hell, as it turns out.
I know we should get back to Daimajin, but this is sort of related because in the original Yu-Gi-Oh, as in Season 0, we should talk about that, but it's intolerable except for the murder scenes. Like, that's what I've told you before. I want to talk about that for a second because in that original season, there was no dual monsters. Yugi assembled the Millennium Puzzle, and he was a young kid who was bullied. He assembles the puzzle, and it summons the Pharaoh, and he turns into the Pharaoh. But the Pharaoh is only known as like the game master at that point. We don't really know much about. We don't know anything about him, and all we know is that he's a master of games and shadow games in particular, or death games, as I guess they were called.
I don't even know if he was. If we knew that he was Egyptian at that point.
Yeah, well, we knew he was Egyptian because he came out of the Millennium Puzzle, which we see get taken from a tomb. Pyramid of Mars from classic Doctor Who style.
That's true. Yeah, I remember that now.
He's kind of like Sutek, except controllable, and then he turns into a good guy.
I haven't read this portion of the manga in a long time, but.
But anyway, so at the end of the first episode, the only parts of it that are worth watching is when he turns into Yami, because that's when he declares to the bad guy, whoever they are, who's either holding up Yugi and his friends, or is trying to murder Yugi for not being bullied properly or whatever. I think that's what was going on in the first episode, and he'll be like, if you don't play this game with me, or play this game with me, and if you win, I'll die, and if you win, if you win, I'll die. If I win, you'll die. And usually they have to agree. So in the first one, he throws a bunch of cards down a wall that's leading into a river, and he's like, we're gonna hang on to this, and if you draw a card that's like a 10, you go up 10 cards, and then you draw that card, and whatever that number is, you go down or up that amount. So they just keep drawing cards until one of them is up and one of them is down. And eventually Yami's like all the way into the water, and the guy thinks that he won, but then suddenly he draws a joker, and Yami's at the top, and then he just falls, and he's like, oh, well, whatever, it's nothing. I'm going to fall into the water, and it'll be cool. And then there's a giant worm monster that comes out of the water, and it eats him. He doesn't die, though. I think he just gets, like mentally paralyzed or whatever. So it's not really a murder scene, but it's like it plays it that way. It's like it plays it as like a serial killer, like killing someone. So the reason why I compare that to Daimajin is that there's all this build up with this other genre of thing in order to set up the supernatural component to come in and solve the problem of the week, And in the Daimajin series, it's this samurai feudalistic Japan political drama stuff, or even just family drama, as we see more in this, well, with a little bit of politics in it. And then Daimajin comes in and kills everybody at the end, just like Yami coming in and murdering high school bullies. So the point is, though, Daimajin does a way better job of getting us there, because, like I said, the original Yu-Gi-Oh season, like the stuff before that bit, is intolerable. It's just kids shouting at each other in Japanese. If it was dubbed, it would probably be more tolerable, but there's no dub of that stuff. So it's not really worth getting into. But Daimajin is. So let's get back to the kids, though. Do they stand out individually?
The little one does, the one that you were talking about.
I don't think in a good way. No, in terms of his name, he's fine. He's not really annoying. I do like that. At first, he tries to follow him. They tell him to fuck off, and then he does. And then he catches up with them, and then they're like, we can't send him back now. And he's like, well, he's going to slow us down. His older brother is. But they convince him to take him along. So I did like him. But
Yeah.
his older brother stands out as more of the protagonist, though.
And I liked the scene when they were crossing the bridge, the log bridge, and he was shooting the dudes with the arrows.
Yes, that was a great bit. So he stands out in that cool way. And I liked how clever they were. Like, I liked how they cut down that tree. They didn't feel the need to bullshit about it. They just did it.
Yeah.
I like stuff like that.
There's also the big kid, the tall kid. He kind of stands out in my mind. He was a bit of a scaredy cat.
That was the guy who actually chopped down the tree, right?
No, he's the one that like was afraid to go across, and then he like almost fell off in the middle. And then they were like, "Yo, hurry up! The people are coming."
Okay. See, they didn't stand out as distinctly to me as I would have liked. As good and earnest and tolerable to watch as they were.
I think he's the one who had the brother that tried to escape, right? The older brother.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm pretty sure he's the one who chopped down the tree. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know why that stuck out to me more than anything else. But yes, his brother was the one who tried to escape and then got thrown into the sulfur pit, because then at the end, the protagonist's dad and Sugi's dad takes him in.
Right. Who? Now, why? Do you remember why the bad guy was trying to throw those guys into the sulfur pit at the very end? Like what they had done? I don't remember what their offense
Who was
was.
he trying to throw into the sulfur pit exactly?
The other people that he... Maybe it was just because they finished the construction, so he didn't need them anymore. Maybe that was the idea.
I'm pretty sure that was the idea, yeah.
Okay, because I couldn't remember them having done anything, you know?
No. And that's the thing. What motivates Daimajin Awakening is all the kid stuff. What's going on at the mine is a little vague, right?
Yeah.
And that's why him killing the bad guy at the end just doesn't really feel as satisfying as the other two movies. Because he's already killed the people who really motivated him awakening. The guys who killed the Hawk, which then got right up and just went about his business. I mean, he murdered them as the Hawk. That's what was so cool about that scene. You know, I thought, because his guards do go up to the statue, but they don't do anything to it. He just wakes up. That was kind of cool, because this was the only one where the statue just kind of gets up out of nowhere, and it's really quick. It just kind of erupts out.
Yeah.
And all the villagers who are related to the kids are up at the statue praying, which I also like. So there's a lot. What I think is good about this one is there's a lot of forethought in it. There's like, okay, so we want to have Daimajin just erupt out to protect the village at the end more benevolently than in the other two films. So we're going to have people praying, and we're going to have all this build up for it, and we're going to foreshadow this distinct character change at the beginning with the destructive part. So I think all of that is what, again, positively stands out about this one. More so than maybe even the kid stuff does. Because again, I think the kid stuff is good, but it's not great. It could have been great had they paced it a little better, and had they balanced it better with the bad guy stuff. I think if the kids had interacted more with the bad guys in the camp, like if they had gotten to the camp first and tried to get their family out on their own, and then it had gone bad, and then Daimajin could have come in, I think that would have been better. I think that would have fixed every problem I have with this, and it would have been better than the second movie. But as it stands, again, it just feels a little soft to me. But what I also want to say in terms of Daimajin's mythos, his old lady guardian in this, total non-start. She tells the kids to fuck off in one bit. Of course they don't. So she kind of feels superfluous. I thought she would have come back towards the end.
Because I don't think she's supposed to play the same role as like the priestess from the first movie.
No, not at all.
She strikes me more as like the old dude from Friday the 13th who's like, "Don't go up there, you'll die," and then they go up there anyway. That's who she was in this movie.
It's not even her role that I think like what she was doing. I just think that she shows up at that one point to warn them off, and I think that she should have come back at some point because Daimajin wakes up. You think she would have been like, "Oh shit."
But based on what she was telling them, she ain't going the fuck up that mountain.
Right.
She's going to stay right the fuck where she was.
Right. Okay. So I think that is not really a problem then. But there are other things that I think are problematic. But I think things that aren't. Do you want to talk about the Daimajin stuff a little bit now, or should we save that? Is there anything else you want to say about the human stuff, or?
No, we can start talking about the Daimajin stuff. It's pretty strong.
We've been saying it's solid, just like the other two films. It's better than the second one practically. The effects are better, partially because it's not as ambitious. They don't try as much like him waving his hands around, destroying stuff with god powers. They do all of that in the beginning, and they do it in a very subtle, creative way by doing close-ups on his body parts. Like, that's what also stood out about that. Like, it was just super close up on his different body parts.
Yeah, they never showed the face. We never got like a full shot of him in that.
There was that great bit where we saw the arms go up to show him changing faces, and we never actually saw the face until we see him as the statue. Like, that's good shit. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But one practical thing that was better than the second one was the actual life-size model they used. Like, the editing was just better, cutting between the full life-size Daimajin and the suit to make the transition between like the face better, because obviously the face on the life-size one doesn't look anything like the suit, so it's better to get that when it gets closer. So I just thought all of that was better, like, because in the second one they were way more ambitious with what they were doing with the actual full-size Daimajin, and they really wouldn't care when you could see that the face was different, and it kind of drove me crazy. So I'm glad they fixed that in this one. And there's that awesome bit where the big hand comes in through the because the big bad guy at the end, he hides in like a tower, and Daimajin sticks his hand in there and routs him out. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's probably the best use of the of the big hand in any of these movies, because they had an actual big hand that they built.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bit where he carries the bad guy in the first one stands out to me more.
But it's just so fucking terrifying. Even though they're the bad guys,
it's good shit.
You kind of feel bad for them,
right?
When the hand breaks in through the roof, you're almost sitting there and going like, oh shit. It puts you in that moment the first time you play Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie, that one level where Kong's hand just comes down through the ceiling.
But it can't do anything to you. It sucks.
No. But the first time it happens.
Yeah, it scares the fuck out of you. Unfortunately, in that game, they can't let you interact at all with Kong, because otherwise it would alter the story. So that's what sucked about that. Like, there was no level where you like had to fight him or anything, like which I thought was stupid. Anyway, we're not talking about that. Believe it or not. Other things that stood out about the Daimajin stuff, him coming out of the ground in the snow with the glow and everything, my god, that was cool. This is the first time his teleportation, like where they really emphasize it. Like, we see it in the second one. He teleports in that one, but it's a lot more subtle. In this one, we see it like, I'm trying to think of a Nightcrawler style, but it's a lot more dramatic because it takes longer. Like, he starts to glow and he fades out and then he erupts from the ground somewhere else. Like, it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And when he carries the kid, that was like the best example of, they knew when to use the big Daimajin, because that's when he actually had the kid in his hand. And then they cut to the suit with a doll, And they actually did a really good job hiding the doll. For a second I had to go, are they doing projection? They weren't, for sure. And that's something with
that kid is also the only person in these movies to, because the princess in the first movie, she pulls out her knife, and the idea is like, oh, I'll offer myself as a sacrifice to get Daimajin to wake up, and then he wakes up before she actually does anything. This kid actually jumps off that cliff. Like, and then Daimajin, like, I guess he caught him, is the idea? But, or no, he dies, doesn't he? And then Daimajin brings him back from the dead. Like the bird in Cooler's Revenge, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I guess it's like that. I wasn't really sure if he was dead. All I knew is that he was in dire straits. He had prayed to Daimajin. I mean, but I'm pretty sure he prays, and then Daimajin just erupts out. Like, I don't remember him, like, he threw himself off a cliff? Intentionally?
I thought he did.
I thought they all fell off. Okay, I believe you. But yeah, at one you're probably right, because what happens is
I definitely remember him standing on a cliff.
That I remember, but I don't remember if he fell off of it. I'm just saying I'm not sure if he intentionally threw himself off. That's what I don't remember happening. But I do remember a cliff, and at the end of it, when Daimajin wakes up, or at least he gets there, he picks him up out of the snow and rejuvenates him, because he is either dead or unconscious. He seemed more unconscious to me, though. So yeah, I guess he did fall off the cliff. I just don't remember him, and I don't remember him going, I'm going to sacrifice myself, and him throwing himself off. If so, that's awesome. But I don't remember that.
I was pretty sure that was the idea, just because that's been the idea,
And it's interesting that this is the one where he's the most benevolent. Like, it wasn't really necessary.
Oh, you know what? We didn't talk about it, but this movie, the balls on this movie, they actually killed a kid, and I mean killed the kid.
Yeah, we didn't mention that yet.
And I was worried the first time I saw this movie. It's like, oh god, Daimajin's gonna like bring him back from the dead at the end of the movie or something. Nah,
nope.
The kid's dead.
He's done. He never comes back. It's a really, really good bit, because he also it's saving Sugi, so dying for a good cause. Just everything is handled so well with them, in terms of their characterization and why they're doing the things they do.
Well, it's another great thing that alleviates the problems with the kids in this movie. Because a lot of times when there's kids in a movie, you never really feel that there's actually stakes. You watch kids in a movie and you're like, oh, they're not going to actually like let it.
They all have plot armor, right?
Yeah. But in this movie, no, like one of them dies, and like completely dies, and you realize, my God, this movie has the balls to kill off a kid. That means that they have the balls to kill off anybody.
And it's pretty brutal. I mean, he gets his leg hurt, and then the rapids drag him away. So
yeah,
we know that he's done. Like, that's a pretty great bit. And again, you definitely feel like and that's why I also think this more than any other kaiju movie or tokusatsu movie, again, since calling Daimajin a kaiju is weird, you really feel like the kids have merit being the protagonist, because they actually go through stuff and do stuff. But again, I feel like if they had gone to the camp and actually tried to get their family out on their own, we would have felt the conclusion of that in a more satisfactory way. Like, Daimajin like kind of comes in before they get to really complete their journey, Yeah. But at the end, it all comes together in a good way. But the snow around Daimajin, I think, also helps when they do the big life-size Daimajin. Because they do that a few times where they just cover him in snow, and you can tell it's the big statue. But it looks a lot. It's hidden by the fact that he's covered in snow. But overall, aesthetically, that just creates a very different mood from the other two movies, and an effective mood, a cold, isolated feel, which reflects both the family members of the villagers who were enslaved and the kids going to save them. And even Daimajin, isolated on the mountain. Isolation is the theme of this movie, but everybody comes together at the end to do the right thing. Daimajin, the kids, the villagers. It's definitely the most like family friendly message wise of all of them as well. So let's talk about this. Did they Gamorify Daimajin in this? Because I mean they did certainly a little bit, but is it too much?
No,
Because he's still just as brutal with the bad guys.
yeah, I guess. I guess that's the difference.
I also
But
think
I'm
it's because
looking.
the
I'm actually just looking back at the scene right now to clarify. So he definitely says, "I offer myself as a sacrifice," but does he actually throw himself off the cliff? Oh yeah, he jumped. Oh shit,
I didn't remember that. Okay, so yep, he
he
totally
jumped
said.
in the snow, and then Daimajin is like, "Oh shit, dead kid, gonna do something about that." If only he
Right,
had been at the river earlier.
right. Well, because he was already awake, or at least he was getting. Because the hawk dying is is what motivates him to be like, all right, I'm gonna get up and do shit. Because my avatar was killed. Um, again, or does he erupt out of the statue after the kid throws himself off the cliff?
He just woke up after the kid threw himself off the cliff.
Ah, okay. So there you go. That is better stakes for Daimajin waking up than what I remembered. Okay, but even still, when I read the wiki for this earlier, the summary of the plot is the bad guys eventually piss off Daimajin and he wakes up. I'm like, not really. He kind of just decides the kids are in too much danger and then he's got to do stuff, which is exactly what happens. So it's not it's not problematic. It's just I just think that that's funny that they described it that way.
I guess it's a combination of the two, really.
They don't really do as much as the bad guys in the other two movies though. Directly to Daimajin. It's not like the bad guy is like Daimajin, bah.
Yeah,
Or at least I don't remember anything like that.
Two movies.
Even more so in the second one than the first one. Like the first one, it's more so at the end, and the second one, it's all throughout. So yeah, I don't think they Gamorify him too much. Again, his reputation is the same as the first two, which is what I think makes it more effective. It's like Gamera versus Gauss. That's why I really like Gamera versus Gauss, because Gamera isn't seen as this protective force except by the kids. Everybody else is scared shitless of him. And
If they had really Gamerified Daimajin, like fully Gamerified him, and it's interesting to use that as a verb considering that not even Gamera was that yet at this point, but if they had really like gone all the way with Gameraizing Daimajin, he would have saved that fucking kid that drowned in the river. He would have shut up right then in the movie, pulled him out of the river, and again did the Goku resurrecting the bird from Revenge of Cooler move.
the bird probably would have done something more than he would have woken up.
But something. That kid would not be dead. That would
Right.
not happen in a game.
Right. Maybe it would though. I mean,
You can put-
they almost ate those kids' brains in Gamera versus Guiron.
Kids get put in peril all the time in Gamera movies, but it's with the distinct understanding that Gamera is going to save them.
Right. It's kind of like Doctor Who, where it's like we're gonna put our characters in like the absolute most horrible jeopardy every episode, but the Doctor will inevitably get them out of it. But we're gonna keep you on the edge of your seats until then.
The companion will get captured every time. It is
Right.
it's a fact of life. But
Right. But it's fine because the Doctor will save them. It's just a matter of when and what condition they'll be in when he does.
there's something to note that if you look hard enough, people listening to this podcast, all three of the Daimajin movies can be found on YouTube right now for free if you haven't seen them.
So you
or
can
haven't
watch
seen
them while you're listening to this because you'll watch most of it by the time this is done.
Or maybe you've seen one of them before but haven't seen the whole trilogy. You can find them all on YouTube. Although honestly, I would recommend going out and buying the Blu-ray. But maybe you want to try them out first and see if you like them. I can understand that impulse. They're out there. they're available.
I guess that's
how
what
it
I
works.
did because I watched a little bit of the first one at G Fest, and then I decided, oh, this is really good. I should actually buy this and sit through it in good quality.
I mean, you also had me recommending it to you for like years.
That's true. You were like, it's really good, and I'm like, yep.
It's been at least a solid year and a half, maybe 2 years at that point, being like, Bill, you need to watch Daimajin.
And I was like,
The fucking great movie.
yep. So I finally did, and they're all really good. This one,
Yeah, it's a really solid trilogy.
yeah, it really is. And you know what else about it makes it that way? It's one of the most consistent trilogies, and I'm not just talking about monster movies or Japanese films in general. Like just 3 movies that all feel like they take place in the same like series and universe, and they're about the same characters and themes, or just character, I guess. But they're also not all the same. You know?
No.
And I think that's what's so good about them. They all are very consistent, but they're they're in their own ways, they are distinct.
It's not a trilogy in like the Star Wars sense, where each movie, feeds into the next. It's more in like an Indiana Jones kind of a way. There's
It is
one
very Indiana
character-
Jones, yeah.
There's one character who's guaranteed to be there, and really he's the star of the show. The fact that he's not human in this case makes it a little bit weirder of a situation. But
And that's why you
it's
have
that-
to have a good story building up to his appearance.
right. It's God. Is it as strong maybe as like Heisei Gamera, like in terms of?
Yeah, I would say so. I would even say
Well,
it's probably consistently better than Heisei Gamera, because Advent of Legion is a pretty big dip for me. I really don't like that movie. But it's not. You know what though? It's not bad in a sense of like, oh, this is poorly made and laughable. I just think it's boring and doesn't have much going on in the plot. So I guess that is another good example of a consistent, tokusatsu trilogy. But I think the 3 movies in this series are just as consistently all good. They're almost as all good as each other, but for me they do descend. But not by much. I think 2 and 3 are about the same. I think 2 has more going on. I think it's better paced. I would rather put that on. But 3 is still really good, and it stands out more. In the conceptual sense and in the very story. But I think just the execution of it is just too soft, and that's what makes it a step down or two from 2 for me.
Yeah, see, for me, the first movie is one of those movies that's like so impeccable. There's very little to find wrong with it for me. It's up there with like your on like a level of like Gojira and stuff like that, where you watch it and you just walk away like that's a fucking like perfect movie, and you have to really go back and look at it to like find the flaws, But
Right.
after watching it, your immediate reaction is just like, holy shit, like that just changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other 2 are,
I like Gojira more, but yeah.
well, yeah, but I'm just saying it's in the same league, I think.
in terms of first monster movies, Daimajin has one of the best.
It's a very small league. There's not a lot of stuff that is up there in
Because
that league.
Gamera doesn't have that.
No, the first
Gamera's
Gamera
first
movie.
movie is not his best. It's not bad, mostly. It's just not great. His second movie is his best show wise, and then 3 is also his. 2 and 3 are my 2 faves from the Gamera Showa series. So he did peak early, just not in the first movie.
Right.
And like I said earlier, I think the Daimajin in this one is like more like this movie is like more in line with like Gauss because of the way they characterize the relationship between the monster and the kids, where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna protect them, but bad stuff will probably still happen to them. Like that kid still got menaced by Gauss pretty bad in Gamera versus Gauss. So he didn't die, but he got pretty close. But it's like the Doctor Who thing we said before though, where it's like, they'll get close, but they'll never actually get hurt or die because the Doctor or Gamera is there.
I mean, he got menaced by a giant prehistoric bird pterodactyl bat thing, but I mean that's all that's always happening. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do about that.
No, not at all. But yeah, no. So let's go to final thoughts on the movie here and kind of ratings. I mean we don't really have to rate it. We've sort of abandoned that whole concept, but I mean it's comparing this to Ghostbusters 2 is not really a thing, you know? like I mean, yeah, it's better. It's also way shorter and a completely different genre.
Even as the weakest of the three, in your opinion, it's still miles ahead of Ghostbusters 2.
It's shorter. It's more unique. It has more emotional weight. Yeah, it's certainly. But it's a completely different thing. I'm trying to think of a better thing to compare it to, like tokusatsu wise. That's of Ghostbusters 2's ilk. It's better than Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster because it came out the same year.
Interestingly enough, both involve bringing a statue to life.
Here's a better way to compare it. The original Daimajin, better than Gamera vs. Barugan. Daimajin 2, not as good as Gamera vs. Barugan. This one, yeah, still not as good as Gamera vs. Barugan. So maybe that's a more apt way to describe it tonally. But all in all, I think that this is one that unfortunately I may not go back to as often. But maybe I will, because I'll try to learn to like it more. Because conceptually, it should be better than the second one, and it could be just as good as the first one, emotional impact wise. I just don't think it gets there. But maybe it can if I just keep watching it enough, Stockholm Syndrome style. That's how these things always work, right?
If you just believe.
If you just force yourself in a dark room long enough, it'll happen.
You just gotta believe in the heart of the cards, Bill.
Do you believe in the heart of the cards?
Not exactly.
When you were sitting in either your living room or a movie theater as a child watching the Yu-Gi-Oh movie, and they had that song at the end that was like, the heart of the cards, influence, that's what you need. That was the lyrics, I'm pretty sure. Did you believe?
Thing. You're right. That was a song, wasn't it? Oh,
yeah,
God.
oh, absolutely.
Oh, that's cringy. No.
There was an entire Yu-Gi-Oh album that came out with the movie. I remember listening to it while playing the game because I didn't have any chance of fucking a girl when I was young.
The only one I remember, though, was the song that played when Kaiba jumped in that plane.
Oh, my God! Yep.
I don't remember it now, but I remember that it was, like, the best one. No, but,
Well, it was, like, the Kaiba is cool song, and I'm like, yeah, he certainly thinks he is.
I thought Kaiba was pretty cool.
Well, I mean, yeah, because he's supposed to be cool. That's the whole idea of Kaiba. But it's like that insecure kind of cool, you know? Like that coolness that's based on, horrible, dark shit. You know? It's not...
He's the Vegeta of that
He's
series.
very Vegeta. But and then, like, Yami is like is very much the Goku, where he's just naturally good, at everything.
I've discovered that most anime of this kind have a Vegeta,
And they also have a Goku.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to have a Goku to have a Vegeta. Without a Goku, the Vegeta is meaningless.
They are the. It's interesting that the yin and the yang of Dragon Ball is in the protagonist roster. Like usually that's like Batman. It's Batman and the Joker. Like that's the yin and the yang.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing that happens a lot in anime. The sort of friendly rivalry,
Right.
Yeah, but you look at all of them, man. Yu-Gi-Oh has Kaiba. Yu Yu Hakusho had Hiei. It's another one.
Yu Yu Hakusho, man.
Oh, Naruto has Sasuke, which actually is kind of an interesting thing because it's kind of the opposite of DBZ, where in DBZ Vegeta starts out as a villain and then becomes the sort of friendly rival, and in Naruto Sasuke starts out as the friendly rival and then becomes a villain later on, and maybe he becomes a friend again by the end of it. I don't know. I never finished that I fell off around volume.
That's
like 50.
unlike Dragon Ball Z though, where it's actually been rebooted, right? Where it's like they've changed.
No, I don't think it's been rebooted. There's a sequel series now about his son.
Oh, he has a son. Wow. I didn't know
Yeah.
I know it was like the Naruto Next Generation.
Yeah, pretty
Well,
much.
Dragon Ball's been rebooted now that I think about it, but in like a very specific way that nobody would really notice unless you know a lot about the series. Or you've been keeping up with it for 20 years.
Basically, him and the chick that all the hentai guys wanted him to fuck. They did, and now they have a kid, and there's a
Awesome.
whole sequel.
I love it when that happens. I love it when those people are happy.
That show went through a huge time skip and then a rebranding. Again, very similar to Dragon Ball Z, but after the rebranding and the time skip, it didn't hold me for very long. I say show as if I watched the show. It was more the manga. I read the manga, but yeah, I fell off after the time skip. So.
Oh my god, wouldn't it be great if there was a Daimajin manga? Like the recent Ultraman manga style?
It would be great.
Oh.
I mean, I want Daimajin everything. I want them to reboot Daimajin, redo a Daimajin, buy my Daimajin versus Gamera script.
Well, I want Daimajin in the present day for sure. I want that story, but I would like to see it where he's more specifically like it's more traditionally like it's the same narrative as the originals, but it's just in a modern day context. So instead of like a feudal political situation, it would be like a modern day like corporate greed type of thing, you know?
Yeah, I want him. I want OG first movie Daimajin if they do.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Without question, sure.
I want the Daimajin who starts off only killing the bad guys, but then gets worked up into a frenzy and just starts killing everybody.
I think you go further with it in a new one too, and then it takes more. It can't be the same thing that stops him, or if it is, it has to. Again, you have to do more.
Daimajin in a modern day context would have to be. It would have to take the ideas that they were playing with in Shin Godzilla, but then go all the way with them, where he
can do anything, and yeah. And
he's just destroying everything in his path.
Right.
You know, not walking around for most of the movie and then having one scene where he destroys everything in his path. No,
right.
I'm talking full on, just the entire movie, just bloodshed and just explosions.
Well, I mean,
so many.
It wouldn't be like 2 hours of it because that's not what the. I wouldn't. You want to do it like the originals, where you have a nice build up to that, where that really feels like it was necessary and has merit, you know.
Right, but see, I would like because
you would want it to be extended. I would be okay with it if it's halfway through.
That's what I'm saying.
Like the first hour can be like you do 2 hours. First hour is build up, and then the last hour is just nonstop killing.
Because I definitely think if they make more Daimajin movies, they're going to be longer than the originals because that's just the way movies are now.
Not necessarily. I mean, they're not. How long are they? Like hour 30, like a typical kaiju movie length.
Right, but I mean, look at Shin. That's longer than that. Look at Legendary. Look at movies in general.
We're talking about modern day films that. Well, Shin is also longer than your typical Japanese film. The Legendary movies make sense. I mean, typically a modern action movie in American films is over 2 hours. Kong Skull Island is actually unique because it's under 2 hours, and that's what I love about it.
I would be willing to sit through a 2.5 hour long Daimajin movie if half of that runtime is devoted to him destroying.
Yeah, oh god. I mean, I've always wanted like a 3 hour Godzilla movie if you did the right thing with it. I won't sit through any 3 hour Godzilla movie, the right one, you know?
Yeah, apparently Blade Runner 2049 is going to be like almost 3 hours long, so it's going to be interesting to see how that fills out that runtime, because the original Blade Runner isn't. Even when you get to like the director's cut and the final cut, it's not that long, you know?
Right. Well, it's not directed by the same person. I imagine it'll feel like a very different animal than the first movie.
Yeah, somebody asked Denis Villeneuve at a panel what Ridley Scott's
named after your father,
was.
perhaps.
Yeah, they asked Denis Villeneuve what Ridley Scott had done to help, and his response was, "He left me alone."
Right. Because he doesn't have to help. Like Blade Runner is very. It speaks a lot to the themes of its own story. Anyway, we're still recording and we're mostly just rambling now. So I say we end this and announce what we're going to talk about next week. So Dylan, we're going to be journeying back to a franchise we actually discussed very recently that I was sort of reluctant to return to, but I've sort of rediscovered my love for. What franchise is that, if you don't mind? you constantly reminding us of what we talk about.
We're gonna talk some Doctor Who next week on the podcasts. We're gonna talk Who. So
New Who? We're gonna talk about some big
not
budget,
new.
modern, fancy, sexy Doctor Who.
Really, every time you watch or finish a season or watch the newest episode, there is no more New Who because it's no longer new to you.
It's
But no,
all classic Doctor Who.
no, we're gonna be talking some classic Who. Do you want to spoil what episodes we're gonna be covering?
Definitely, because let people watch them so that way they can get ready.
Okay, well, basically, we want to start talking about some classic Who episodes here and there, and we're not going to go in like order because that would be insane. Because there's a lot of it, first of all, and second of all, most of it is lost, or not most of it, but a lot of it is lost. So we're not going to try and go in order, but we are going to start at the beginning.
Right.
We're going to talk about the first two ever Doctor Who stories, which is the Unearthly Child / Caveman serial, and the very first Dalek story starring William Hartnell, and maybe we'll drop some allusions to the Peter Cushing version as well. But
have you seen that?
the Peter Cushing movie, the first one, yes, I have not seen the second one.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Dalek. I haven't seen any of the Dalek story that the second one is based on. I've seen a little bit of the William Hartnell one as well. I haven't finished it, but I will obviously for next week's episode. But yeah, I'm very unfamiliar with the first Doctor's era. I've seen a little bit here and there, but never really anything that stood out to me. I like him, but that era is just very. It's not Doctor Who yet, really. You know, it doesn't really get. I don't know if we really get there until the end of Pertwee's era and then into Baker. That's when it really feels like, oh, this is pretty much exactly the same as what I'm watching now.
Yeah, for me, I think, well, what's the first adventure Pertwee has after he gets his TARDIS back? Is it the Carnival of Monsters? Pretty
sure it's Carnival of Monsters, which I've seen.
Yeah, right around that time is when it's like, we're back to this is what we are used to in New Who right here. This is the dynamic here.
Right. Because, like, even when Troughton I'm even less familiar with than Hartnell's era, so I think we'll probably do him next, if you don't mind. We probably will sort of go in order initially, but after that we'll just go, let's talk about this story now. But initially I kind of want to go to the different Doctors because I'm more familiar with certain ones than I am others, you know? Like, I'm very familiar with Pertwee, I'm very familiar now with Tom Baker. And I'm very, very familiar with, you know, I know Paul McGann, even though he's not really a classic Doctor in the traditional sense. I've seen that movie.
That'll be fun when we get to we can review that movie.
Yeah, we will. We should review that movie. We don't have to wait. We can do that whenever. Because there's not even a lot to say about that movie. Like, it's fine. Eric Roberts is fucking hilarious.
It's a movie.
The Doctor runs around. And that's it.
It's not better than Ghostbusters 2, but it's not as far off as you might imagine.
No, they're about to... it's a little worse than Ghostbusters 2. Anyway, so we're not talking about that next week. We're talking about The Unearthly Child and Daleks Try to Kill Us, the movie. No, it's not the movie. It's the show. It's the serial. So yeah, join us for that and many other things down the line. So... until then, I am Bill Worcester, a.k.a. Zazubaar.
I'm SuperDM64.
And you can't fucking see us, because it's a podcast. Colonel Hogan.